He offered his only blanket to a shivering alien widow. She gave him a lifetime of warmth in return. Jack moved slowly through the ruins of the old space station. The metal floors creaked under his boots, and sparks jumped from broken wires. The station had been abandoned after the last border skirmish between the human colonies and the Drakari Empire. Most humans had left long ago, and scavengers came only for parts or food. Jack was one of those scavengers, but unlike most, he stayed in the station because he had nowhere else to go. He pulled his coat tighter around his thin frame. The cold had already started to seep into his bones. The temperature control system was broken, and the station was a frozen shell drifting silently in space. Jack's stomach growled. He had eaten little for days, and the last packet of rations was gone. He stopped for a moment, leaning against a wall, his breath making small clouds in the frozen air. As he moved down a narrow corridor, he heard something that made him pause. A soft, quiet sound, like a low whimper. He frowned. The station should have been empty. Slowly, he crept toward the sound. His boots made little noise against the metal floor, but the sound grew clearer as he got closer. In a small corner, half hidden under a pile of broken crates, he saw her. She was unlike anything he had seen before. Her skin was pale blue, with a faint glow that seemed almost alive. Her eyes were large and dark, reflecting fear and sadness. She was shivering violently, wrapped in scraps of cloth that did nothing to keep her warm. Jack froze for a moment, unsure what to do. Humans did not often meet aliens like her, especially alone and vulnerable. Most would have ignored her, but Jack's heart did not allow it. He slowly approached her, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "Hey, are you okay?" he asked, his voice rough from the cold and lack of use. The alien looked at him with wide eyes, her body trembling. She did not speak, and Jack realized that she probably did not understand him. He looked around the room. There was nothing here that could help her. No blankets, no heat packs, nothing except the one thermal blanket he had wrapped around himself. He hesitated. He needed it too. The blanket was thin, but it would keep him alive through the freezing night. And yet, looking at her shivering, he could not just leave her there. Without thinking, he pulled the blanket from his shoulders and held it out to her. "Take it," he said. "You'll freeze if you stay like this." She hesitated. Jack could see the confusion in her eyes. She had probably never met a human who would do something like this without expecting something in return. Slowly, she reached out and took the blanket. The warmth began to touch her skin, and for the first time in days, she stopped shivering. Jack shivered himself as he wrapped his arms around himself, the cold biting deeper now that he had given away his only protection. But he did not regret it. He watched her, her small form huddled under the blanket, and he felt a strange comfort. Somehow, helping her made him feel less alone in the cold emptiness of the station. Hours passed. Jack sat nearby, keeping watch. The station was dangerous. Rogue scavengers sometimes came through looking for food or parts, and the occasional security drone still patrolled areas, even broken and malfunctioning. He could not leave her alone, not while she was so vulnerable. The alien, whose name he would later learn was Saley, began to move slightly under the blanket. Her eyes tracked him, curious and cautious. She tilted her head, studying him as if trying to understand why he had helped her. Jack offered a weak smile. "You don't have to understand," he said softly. "Just stay warm." As night fell, the cold grew worse. The temperature dropped to levels Jack had not felt in years. His teeth chattered, and his fingers turned numb. But Saley remained under the blanket, her body slowly regaining warmth. He could see her breathing becoming steadier. She even gave a small, almost invisible nod in his direction. It was not a smile, but it was the closest thing to gratitude he had ever seen on an alien face. Jack remembered the stories his mother had told them about humanity's first encounters with other species. They were usually violent or cold. Fear and misunderstanding often led to death, but here, in this frozen, broken station, a human had made a choice that was simple but powerful. He had given warmth to someone who had nothing. And somehow that small choice mattered more than any weapon or technology. The hours crawled slowly. Jack tried to keep warm by moving, but every step reminded him of the missing blanket. His coat was thin, and the station offered no real protection. He wished he had more food, more heat, more anything. But he knew one thing. If he stayed alive, he would protect her as best he could. As he watched, he noticed small things about her. The way her fingers flexed around the blanket, the faint shimmer of her skin in the dim lights, the way her eyes seemed to study him constantly. She was wary, but not hostile. Jack realized she might have been hiding from danger for a long time. Maybe her entire life had been one of survival. He thought about his own life. He had survived by being clever, by taking risks, by staying hidden. But he had never truly helped anyone like this. Giving the blanket had cost him warmth, safety, comfort. Yet the feeling he got from seeing her safe and alive was more than worth it. The station creaked and groaned around them. A section of the wall nearby had collapsed, leaving a hole where cold air rushed in. Jack moved quickly, placing himself between her and the open space. "Stay close," he said, shivering. Sally moved slightly toward him, though she did not speak. Her eyes held a strange trust, growing slowly as the night stretched on. Time passed. The darkness of space pressed against the walls, a silent reminder of how alone they were. Jack thought about what he would do tomorrow. He needed food, he needed supplies, and he needed to find a way to survive, but first, he had to make sure she survived. He remembered a trick his father had taught him long ago. If you are cold, try to share heat with someone else. Somehow it worked better than anything else. He shifted slightly, letting a small part of the blanket touch his shoulder again. Not enough to warm him fully, but enough to remind him that they were not completely alone. Sally began to move more, testing the blanket, testing him. Jack realized that she might be learning to trust humans, or at least him. That small spark of connection was rare, almost impossible in a world where humans and aliens often killed each other without thought. He felt proud, quietly, without words. The night was long. Jack shivered, his body screaming for warmth. He thought about giving up, about crawling into a corner and letting the cold take him. But every time he looked at Sally, he found the strength to continue. Her survival had become a mission, a purpose he had never known before. By the time the first faint light of the distant star filtered into the broken windows of the station, Jack was exhausted. His teeth were sore from chattering, his fingers stiff, and his body weak. Yet, when he looked at Sally, he saw her awake, eyes bright, still wrapped in the blanket he had given her. She looked at him, and this time she gave a very small smile. It was not much, but to Jack it meant the world. He realized then that kindness was more powerful than any weapon he had ever held. A simple act, like giving a blanket, could create trust, hope, and life itself. And in the cold, silent station, that small act had given both of them something rare and precious, a connection that could not be broken. Jack knew their journey was only beginning. The galaxy outside was dangerous, full of people who would not care about her, full of machines that could crush them both in seconds. But for now, in the quiet, broken station, they were alive, together and warm. That was enough, he whispered softly, more to himself than to her. We'll make it, somehow. We'll make it.
Sally looked at him, tilting her head as if she understood.
And for the first time, Jack did not feel entirely alone in the universe. The next morning, Jack woke to the sound of metal creaking. The station had grown colder during the night, but the first rays of a distant sun made the broken windows glint faintly. He was stiff and sore from sleeping on the hard floor, but he felt a small warmth in his chest when he saw Sally. She was sitting quietly, wrapped in the blanket, her large, dark eyes watching him. He rubbed his arms to bring back feeling. "Morning," he said softly. Sally tilted her head, almost like she was listening. Jack smiled a little. She still did not speak human, but he was learning that words were not always needed. Actions, small kindnesses, could communicate more than language ever could. He scanned the room. The station was quiet. Too quiet. Most scavengers had already left for the day, but there could be drones or wandering patrols. He needed to find more food and a way to keep them both warm. Sally had survived the night because of the blanket, but that was not enough for long-term survival. He stepped carefully over broken wires and scattered debris. Sally watched him, her eyes following every move. She did not approach him yet, but her curiosity was clear. Jack had seen fear in many aliens before, but this was different. She was not hostile. She was cautious, curious, and in some way grateful. He moved toward the storage section of the station. Shelves had collapsed, and most of the goods were ruined, but he spotted a small crate with ration packs still sealed. He lifted it carefully. Inside were a few preserved food packets and a water container. It was not much, but it would keep them alive for a few days. He returned to Sally and offered her a ration pack. She stared at it, unsure what it was. He opened one and took a small bite himself. "Here," he said, pointing to the pack. "You eat. It will help you keep strong." She hesitated, then slowly mimicked his actions, opening the pack and taking a small taste. Her eyes widened slightly and she made a soft sound, almost like a sigh of relief. Jack chuckled softly. "Good," he said. "Not so bad." She tilted her head again, studying him. He realized that she was learning, not just from what he said, but from what he did. Everything about humans, even small actions, seemed strange and unpredictable to her. And yet here she was, trusting him enough to accept help. The day passed slowly. Jack and Sally explored the station together. He showed her which corridors were safe, which floors were weak, and where they could find small pockets of warmth near damaged machinery. Sally watched him carefully, learning quickly. He noticed that she had an unusual way of moving. Her body seemed to adjust to the temperature automatically. She did not shiver like he did, and she seemed to sense the cold in ways he could not. At one point, he stopped near a broken heating vent. "This place used to be warm," he said softly, more to himself than to her. "Now it's just empty." Sally looked at him, then reached out with her hand and touched the vent. A faint warmth radiated from her fingers. Jack froze for a moment. He had not realized it, but she was able to control heat in some way. The warmth spread slowly, enough to take the edge off the freezing air. He stared at her in surprise. You can do that?" he asked. She looked at him, blinking slowly. She did not answer, but she moved her hand again, warming the small area around them. Jack felt his own body relax slightly. He realized that her gift could help both of them survive. They spent the next few hours moving through the station. Jack carried the few supplies they had found, while Sally stayed close, keeping the air around them slightly warmer. It was strange, this partnership, but it worked. She did not speak his language, and he did not understand hers, yet they communicated through actions, gestures, and shared survival. As night approached again, the cold grew stronger. Jack could feel his teeth chattering and his fingers stiffening despite the small warmth Sally provided. He wrapped what remained of his coat around himself and moved closer to her. "Stay close," he said. She did, leaning slightly toward him, her body glowing faintly, providing small comfort. They found a corner that was partially protected by fallen debris. Jack spread out the blanket again, this time letting both of them share it. He shivered under its thin fabric, but he could feel the warmth from Sally spreading to him. It was not as strong as the blanket alone, but combined it kept them alive. Jack watched her face in the dim light. She was still wary, still cautious, but he could see understanding beginning to grow. She knew that he had given her the blanket not for reward or favor, but because he wanted her to survive. Humans did strange things sometimes. Acts of kindness could be bigger than fear, bigger than hunger, bigger than war. He thought about the galaxy outside. Humans and aliens often fought without thought, taking lives without knowing the stories of those they killed. But here, in a cold, forgotten station, a human and an alien were learning from each other. teaching each other in the simplest ways: warmth, protection, and trust. Jack shifted slightly, trying to make himself more comfortable. "You saved me too," he said softly, more to himself than to her. She looked at him with wide eyes, then touched his hand briefly. He felt a small spark of heat at the point of contact. It was not much, but it was enough to remind him that they were no longer alone. He remembered the stories of his childhood, of humans who had helped strangers across the galaxy. Most were small, simple gestures, often forgotten by history. But he realized now that those small gestures could change everything. They could save lives, create bonds, and even teach a species something new. The night was long. Jack stayed awake, watching the station for signs of danger. Sally moved slightly under the blanket, occasionally brushing her hand against his arm, providing warmth in return. It was a strange exchange, simple yet powerful. He realized that survival was no longer just about food or shelter. It was about trust, connection, and small acts of care. As the hours passed, Jack began to notice something else. Sally was learning from him, but he was learning from her as well. Her way of controlling warmth, her calm and measured movements, even her patience with the harsh environment, all of it taught him new ways to survive. He had spent years relying only on himself, but now he understood the power of partnership. When the first light of the distant star returned, they were still alive. Jack's body was exhausted, but his mind was alert. He looked at Sally, who was awake and observing him quietly. She did not smile, but her eyes held a softness he had not seen before. It was not just trust anymore. It was understanding. She knew that he would protect her, and he knew that she could protect him in ways he could not. Jack spoke softly, almost in a whisper. "We'll make it," he said. She tilted her head, blinking slowly. It was not words, but it was an answer. He realized that they had formed a bond stronger than language, stronger than fear. It was a bond of survival, warmth, and care. He thought about the journey ahead. The station was dangerous, the galaxy beyond was full of threats, and they had little food or supplies. But for the first time, Jack felt hope. Not because of weapons, technology, or strategy, but because of simple trust, simple warmth, and simple kindness. The rest of the day passed with small tasks. Jack found a small section of the station where the temperature was slightly higher due to a damaged reactor. He guided Sally there, letting her glow warmth around them. He found small amounts of food hidden in debris and shared it with her. Each action, each small gesture strengthened their bond. As night fell again, Jack reflected on what had happened. The alien who had once been a stranger, possibly an enemy, had survived the night because of a human choice. And he, in turn, had survived because of her unique abilities. It was simple, basic, yet profound. They were no longer just survivors. They were companions, bound by the cold, the station, and the choices they had made. He looked at her quietly. "We'll get through this," he said. "Together." She moved slightly closer, resting her head near his shoulder. He could feel the faint warmth from her body. It was not much, but it was enough. Jack realized then that survival was no longer just about being alive. It was about connection, care, and learning to trust, even in a galaxy that had taught him that trust was dangerous. Here, in this small broken station, they had begun something rare. Something that could last far beyond the cold and fear of the present. He wrapped his arm gently around her, careful not to touch too much, but enough to offer reassurance. She did not speak, but the small pressure of her hand against his was enough to tell him she understood. And for the first time in a long time, Jack slept without fear. The blanket, the shared warmth, and the presence of another being made the cold more bearable. It was not perfect, but it was enough to survive another day, and he knew that tomorrow they would face it together. The next morning, Jack woke to the sound of distant clanging from the station's corridors. His body ached from the cold, but he was more alert than ever. Sally was already awake, sitting quietly and observing the corridor with her large dark eyes. Jack noticed a faint glow around her skin, just as he had seen the day before. The warmth she gave off was small, but it helped him endure the cold. He rose carefully, trying not to disturb the fragile stillness of the room. He looked around the station. Most corridors were empty, but the noise he had heard suggested that others had arrived. Scavengers, drones, or worse, mercenaries looking for anything valuable. He could feel a tight knot of worry in his chest. They had survived the night, but surviving the day would be harder. He moved quietly, beckoning Sally to follow. She obeyed without hesitation. Jack led her through the station's narrow hallways, avoiding loose panels and broken floors. She walked carefully, almost floating, her body adjusting naturally to the cold and the uneven metal surfaces. He realized that her abilities went beyond just controlling warmth. She had a balance and agility that he could only dream of. As they turned a corner, Jack froze. A group of scavengers had entered the main hall, their weapons drawn, eyes scanning the room. They were humans like him, but hardened and cruel, with little concern for anyone else. Jack's heart raced. He knew they could not fight them all. Any wrong move would mean death for both him and Sally. He crouched low behind a pile of debris. Sally pressed close to him, her body glowing faintly, giving off warmth that was almost invisible in the cold air. Jack whispered, "Stay quiet, don't move." She nodded, her eyes wide, but calm. He realized that she trusted him completely, more than he had expected. The scavengers moved closer. Jack could hear their footsteps echoing on the metal floor. He counted them carefully, 5 in total. They were looking for supplies, but they would kill anything in their way. Jack's mind raced. They could not fight all of them, but he needed to protect Sally. He looked at her and gestured toward a side corridor. She understood immediately. Together they moved silently, slipping behind a broken wall, just as the scavengers passed the main hall. They moved slowly, careful not to make any sound. Jack's heart pounded with every step. Sally stayed close, her glow providing a small amount of warmth that kept him from freezing completely. He realized that if she had not been there, he might have been too weak from the cold to even move. Together they were stronger than he had imagined. As they reached a more stable section of the station, Jack paused to catch his breath. "We need a plan," he whispered. Sally tilted her head, listening carefully. He pointed toward a storage room nearby. "We hide there. It's small, but it will give us cover. We can think of what to do next." She nodded again, moving silently beside him. They entered the storage room. It was dark and filled with old supplies, most of them ruined by water and rust. Jack spread the blanket over a pile of crates, giving both of them a small place to sit. Sally settled beside him, her body glowing softly, filling the space with warmth. He could feel it on his hands and face, and it made him realize how much he had depended on her without even noticing. Jack thought about the scavengers. They were armed and dangerous, but they were human. He could predict some of their movements, some of their mistakes. He realized that if he could distract them, he might be able to escape with Sally. He needed to be smart, careful, and fast. He whispered, "Stay here. Don't move unless I tell you." Sally looked at him, then pressed a hand lightly against his arm. He nodded. He knew she understood. She would follow his instructions just as he would protect her no matter what. Jack crept out of the storage room, moving along the walls. He could hear the scavengers talking. Their voices were harsh, filled with greed and suspicion. They had not seen him yet. He spotted a loose panel on the ceiling and an open vent nearby. A small idea formed in his mind. If he could climb into the vent and drop something to distract them, they might be able to slip past. He grabbed a small metal pipe and climbed quietly toward the vent. Sally waited in the shadows, her body tense but still glowing faintly. Jack reached the vent and pushed it open. He lifted the pipe and dropped it down the corridor. It clanged loudly against the metal floor. The scavengers froze, then turned toward the sound, their attention fully on the noise. Jack slipped back to the storage room. Sally was waiting, watching the corridor with wide eyes. He whispered, "We go now!" She moved beside him, her body giving off a faint warmth that made the cold more bearable. They slipped through the corridor, moving as quietly as possible. The scavengers had been distracted, and Jack knew they had only a short window. They moved through the station, turning corners and avoiding open areas. Jack felt adrenaline pumping through his veins. He realized that every step they took was a test of trust. He trusted Sally to stay close and follow his lead, and she trusted him to protect her. Together, they were a small team, a fragile but determined pair in a dangerous world. As they reached a maintenance tunnel, Jack paused. The tunnel was narrow and dark, but it led to a side exit he had noticed the day before. He whispered, "This way! Keep close!" Sally pressed her hand lightly against his arm, providing a small warmth that was comforting and grounding. He realized that their connection was growing stronger with every challenge they faced. They moved through the tunnel slowly, the sound of their breathing echoing off the walls. Jack kept his eyes open for traps, broken floors, or patrols. Sally moved beside him, silent but aware, her glow providing just enough light to see. It was a tense journey, but they were careful, smart, and focused. Finally, they reached the exit. It led to a small exterior platform, exposed to the cold of space but hidden from view by a collapsed wall. Jack helped Sally step onto the platform. She moved carefully, her balance perfect despite the uneven surface. He followed, shivering as the cold air hit him. But Sally's warmth reached him again, soft and steady, and he felt himself regain some strength. They paused, looking out at the dark expanse of space. The stars were distant, cold, and beautiful. Jack realized how fragile they were in the vast universe, how easy it would be to be lost or killed. But he also realized that together they had survived where most others would have failed. They had relied on each other, and that trust had saved them. He looked at Sally. She did not speak, but her eyes held something new. Respect. Understanding. A quiet acknowledgement that they were no longer just strangers. They were companions, partners in survival, bound by the dangers they had faced. Jack reached into his coat and pulled out the small remaining blanket. He wrapped it loosely around both of them. The warmth from the fabric combined with Sally's glow created a small circle of heat in the freezing platform. He realized that they could survive this, at least for a little while longer, because they had each other. He whispered, "We'll keep moving. Stay close, and we'll find somewhere safe." Sally pressed her hand lightly against his chest, a silent agreement. He felt a spark of warmth at the contact, not just from her body, but from the trust and bond they were building. As night fell, the platform grew colder. Jack shivered but refused to move away from Sally. The stars stretched endlessly around them, and he thought about the dangers ahead. Mercenaries, scavengers, hostile drones. They were all threats, but he now knew that their greatest strength was not weapons or speed. It was the trust they had in each other. He remembered the first night, when he had given her the blanket. Back then, he had done it because he could not leave her to die. Now, after surviving danger together, he realized that simple kindness had grown into something stronger. It was the start of a bond that would carry them through far greater challenges. Jack stayed awake, watching the stars and listening for signs of danger. Sally remained close, her glow steady and comforting. He knew that tomorrow they would face more threats, more challenges, but he also knew that together they had a chance. "A real chance," he whispered softly. "We survive together." Always. Sally pressed her hand to his arm again, her small warmth a promise. And for the first time since he had entered the abandoned station, Jack felt hope, not just for himself, but for both of them. They were no longer alone. They had each other, and that was enough to face the cold, the danger, and the darkness of the galaxy. Jack and Sally moved slowly across the station's outer platforms. The cold bit into their skin, but together they felt stronger than before. The dangers of scavengers and rogue drones had taught them to be careful, to trust each other, and to rely on the small warmth they could create together. Jack carried the few supplies they had found, and Sally's faint glow filled the air with a gentle heat that kept them alive. Jack paused for a moment, looking at Sally. "We can't stay here," he said. "This place is too dangerous. We need somewhere safe, somewhere we can rest and think." Sally tilted her head, watching him closely. She seemed to understand, though she did not speak. Jack realized that she could sense his intentions in a way humans could not. He spotted a small shuttle dock at the edge of the platform. It was old, abandoned, but it might still work. He led Sally toward it, careful to avoid broken panels and weak floors. The stars stretched endlessly around them, cold and distant, but Jack felt hope. For the first time, he believed they could escape the station and find safety together. As they reached the shuttle, Jack noticed something strange. The air around Sally seemed to shimmer more than usual. Her glow was stronger, warmer. He realized that she was reacting to the cold outside the station. Her body was creating heat, not just for herself, but for him as well. He felt a rush of gratitude. Without her, he might not have survived the freezing night. He began to open the shuttle's hatch, but the metal was frozen and stiff. He struggled, and Sally moved closer, placing her hands on the controls. A soft warmth spread through the metal, loosening it enough for him to push the door open. Jack froze for a moment, staring at her. You did that?" he whispered. Sally blinked slowly, then nodded. Inside the shuttle, the temperature was slightly better, but still cold. Jack wrapped the blanket around both of them. Sally's glow combined with the blanket's warmth, creating a small zone of comfort. He looked at her and smiled. "We make a good team," he said softly. She pressed her hand lightly against his arm, a small gesture that felt like agreement. Jack started the shuttle systems. The engine sputtered, then roared to life. The vibration and warmth were comforting, and he felt a spark of hope. Sally moved beside him, her body glowing steadily, and he realized that her abilities were not just for survival. She could control heat in ways that might help them escape the dangers of the galaxy. As the shuttle lifted off the platform, Jack looked out at the station below. It was a frozen, broken place full of danger, but it had brought him and Sally together. He thought about how a simple act, giving her the blanket, had changed everything. Without that choice, she might have died alone, and he might have been left to face the station's dangers by himself. The shuttle drifted into space. Jack plotted a course to a nearby neutral planet where they could find food, warmth, and safety. Sally watched the controls curiously, her hands hovering over the buttons. She did not touch them, but her presence seemed to stabilize the shuttle. Jack realized that she might have an instinctive understanding of technology, even without training. Hours passed. The stars streaked past the shuttle's windows, and Jack felt a sense of calm he had not known for years. Sally remained beside him, her glow steady. He looked at her and realized that she had become more than just a companion. She was a partner, a friend, and perhaps something even deeper. Suddenly, an alert sounded. Jack froze. The shuttle's sensors detected movement, an unidentified ship approaching fast. He squinted at the screen. It was a patrol ship from the Drakari Empire. Their weapons could destroy the shuttle in seconds. He felt a surge of fear, but knew he could not panic. He looked at Sally, who met his gaze calmly. Her glow brightened, filling the shuttle with warmth. It was as if she was telling him, "We can handle this together." Jack adjusted the shuttle's controls, trying to evade the approaching ship. The patrol vessel fired warning shots, and the shuttle shook with each hit. Jack's hands were steady, but his heart raced. Sally pressed her hands against the console, and he felt a sudden warmth surge through the shuttle. The system stabilized, and he realized that she was helping him, using her abilities to protect the ship. He focused, dodging debris and returning fire when necessary. Sally remained beside him, calm and steady. Her presence was more than comforting. It was essential. Jack realized that together they could survive threats that would have killed him alone. He adjusted the shuttle's course, weaving between asteroids and debris, using every trick he knew. After tense minutes that felt like hours, the patrol ship gave up and moved away. Jack exhaled deeply. He looked at Sally, who had returned to her normal glow, soft and steady. He smiled. "We made it," he said softly. She pressed her hand lightly against his arm, a simple gesture that spoke volumes. They drifted in space for a while, catching their breath and letting the adrenaline fade. Jack realized that Sally's abilities were not just a gift, they were a lifeline. She could control heat, stabilize machinery, and sense danger in ways humans could not. Together, they were stronger than he had ever imagined. Jack plodded the shuttle toward the neutral planet. It would take hours to reach, but it was safer than remaining near the station. He shared the remaining food with Sally, and they ate quietly. The simple act of sharing a meal, of surviving together, felt more meaningful than anything he had done before. As they approached the planet, Jack noticed its surface. It was green and warm, a stark contrast to the frozen station they had left behind. He felt a surge of hope. They could rest, recover, and plan their next move. Sally's glow filled the shuttle with warmth, and Jack realized that their bond had grown stronger through the dangers they had faced. They landed on the planet carefully, choosing a small clearing near a river. The shuttle's engines cooled, and Jack stepped outside. The air was fresh and warm, and he felt the cold of the station fade from his body. Sally followed, her glow adjusting to the planet's temperature. She seemed curious, exploring the new environment with careful steps. Jack looked at her and smiled. "We made it," he said. She pressed her hand lightly against his chest, a simple gesture of trust. He realized that their journey was far from over, but for now, they had found safety. They set up a small camp near the shuttle. Jack gathered firewood, and Sally helped in her own way, glowing faintly to dry, damp materials. Together they built a small fire, and Jack wrapped the blanket around both of them. The warmth of the fire combined with Sally's glow created a small circle of comfort in the wilderness. As night fell, Jack stared at the stars above. He thought about the station, the scavengers, and the patrol ship. He thought about how far they had come, how much they had survived together. He realized that trust, kindness, and cooperation had saved them more than any weapon or strategy. Sally sat beside him, her glow soft and steady. She did not speak, but Jack felt her understanding. They had faced danger, cold, and fear together. They had learned to rely on each other, and that trust had become their greatest strength. Jack whispered softly, "We'll survive. We'll get through whatever comes next." Sally pressed her hand lightly against his arm, a small but powerful gesture. He realized that their bond had grown beyond survival. It was something rare, something that could carry them through the galaxy's dangers. He wrapped the blanket more tightly around them and rested against a tree. Sally nestled beside him, her warmth steady. Jack closed his eyes, feeling the safety of her presence. He knew the journey ahead would be difficult, but he also knew that together they could face anything. The fire crackled, the stars shone, and the warmth of trust filled the small clearing. Jack realized that the simple act of giving a blanket, of showing kindness without expecting anything, had led them here. It had created a bond that could survive the coldest nights, the deadliest dangers, and the most uncertain futures. He looked at Sally one last time before sleep took him. Her eyes met his, and he saw understanding, trust, and something deeper. He smiled, knowing that they had found more than safety. They had found each other, and that was a gift stronger than anything else in the galaxy. Jack woke to the sound of birds singing in the distance. The warm light of the planet bathed the small clearing where he and Sally had camped. For the first time in days, he felt safe. The cold, the abandoned station, and the dangers of space felt far away. He stretched, rubbing his stiff muscles, and looked at Sally. She was awake too, her faint blue glow blending with the soft sunlight. She looked peaceful, almost at home. Jack smiled. "Good morning," he said softly. Sally tilted her head, blinking slowly. He realized that even though she did not speak his language, they had learned to understand each other in other ways. Gestures, actions, small touches, these had become their own language. He felt a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the blanket or her glow. It was trust, friendship, and something deeper. They began the day by exploring the nearby area. Jack carried the few supplies they had left, while CLE stayed close, glowing softly and providing warmth. The planet was alive in a way the station never was. Green trees, clear rivers, and soft wind made the air feel fresh. Jack breathed deeply, feeling a sense of peace he had not known in years. As they moved, Jack thought about their journey. The abandoned station, the scavengers, the patrol ship. They had survived everything because they had each other. He realized that their bond was rare. Humans and aliens rarely trusted one another. They rarely worked together without fear. But he and Sally had done it. They had survived because of kindness, trust, and cooperation. They came across a small village in the distance. Jack's heart raced. It was likely neutral ground, far from the conflicts of the human colonies and alien empires. They approached carefully, keeping to the shadows. Sally's glow was faint now, blending with the sunlight. She moved cautiously beside him, but her presence was steady, reassuring. As they neared the village, a group of villagers appeared. They were humans, simple people living quietly on the planet. They looked at Jack and Sally with curiosity. Jack raised his hands, showing they meant no harm. Sally mirrored his actions. The villagers relaxed slightly, welcoming them with cautious smiles. Jack spoke softly to the villagers, explaining that they needed food, warmth, and shelter. Sally did not speak, but her gestures helped communicate their needs. The villagers brought them water, food, and blankets. Jack felt a deep gratitude. It had been so long since he had felt human kindness from people who were not strangers or enemies. That night, Jack and Sally sat near a fire in the village. The warmth of the flames mixed with Sally's soft glow, creating a comforting circle around them. Jack reflected on how far they had come. From the abandoned station to a neutral village, from fear and cold to trust and safety, they had survived together. Sally rested her head near Jack's shoulder. He felt her warmth, steady and real. He realized that her presence had become essential to his survival, not just physically, but emotionally. He had given her a blanket when she was weak, and now she gave him something far greater, a lifetime of companionship, protection, and understanding. The next few days passed in quiet comfort. Jack and Sally helped the villagers, fixing small machines, gathering food, and teaching what they could. Sally's glow became stronger when she worked. Showing her abilities could help others, Jack watched her and felt pride. She had once been a fragile, shivering alien, and now she was a powerful presence, respected and admired. One evening, as the sun set, Jack and Cecily sat together outside the village. The sky was painted in orange and pink, reflecting on the river nearby. Jack looked at her and spoke softly. "We've survived so much, and it's because we trusted each other." She looked at him, blinking slowly, a small smile forming. He realized that her understanding went beyond words. She knew that their bond had saved them both. Jack thought about the galaxy beyond the planet. Dangers still existed. Patrol ships, hostile scavengers, war. But he no longer felt alone. He knew that with Sally he could face whatever came. Their bond was stronger than fear, stronger than cold, stronger than death. It was a bond built on simple acts, giving a blanket, sharing warmth, showing care. Days turned into weeks. Jack and Sally became part of the village. They were no longer just survivors. They were helpers, friends, and protectors. Jack taught humans simple ways to survive the harsh galaxy. Sally used her abilities to aid everyone, controlling warmth, healing small injuries, and helping machines run better. Together, they became a team that others respected and admired. One night, as they sat by the fire, a young child approached them. The child was curious, asking questions in simple words. Jack smiled, answering carefully. Sally mimicked gestures, showing the child how to use warmth safely. The child laughed, and Jack realized that their journey had created more than survival. They had created hope. Jack turned to Sally. "You know that first night? When I gave you the blanket, I didn't know it would come to this." She tilted her head, glowing softly. He smiled. "We've found more than safety. We've found something rare. Trust, friendship, and maybe even family." She pressed her hand against his arm lightly, a small, powerful gesture. The village soon learned their story. Humans told other humans about Jack, and whispers of Sally spread among alien travelers. People began to understand that humanity could be kind even when others expected cruelty. Jack realized that their story would travel far. Simple kindness could inspire more than fear, violence, or war. As the weeks passed, Jack and Sally grew closer. They explored the planet together, learning its secrets, enjoying its warmth. Jack taught her about human ways, simple things like cooking, walking, and understanding people. Sally taught him about her species, how they could control heat, how they sensed the world differently, and how strength could come from care, not weapons. One night Jack looked at the stars, thinking about the galaxy beyond. He realized that there would always be dangers, but they had learned to survive them together. The bond they shared was unbreakable. He knew that wherever they went, whatever challenges awaited, they would face them side by side. Sally rested beside him, her glow gentle. Jack wrapped the blanket around them both. It had been his first gift to her, a simple act of kindness. Now it symbolized much more. It symbolized survival, trust, and a lifetime of warmth. He knew that the galaxy could be cold and cruel, but with her, he would never feel alone again. He whispered softly, "We've come so far, and we'll keep going. Together." She pressed her hand against his chest, her warmth filling him with reassurance. It was more than a gesture. It was a promise. A promise that they would face the galaxy's dangers together, no matter what. As the stars shone above, Jack realized that their journey had changed them both. A human had given a blanket to a shivering alien widow, and in return, he had gained a lifetime of warmth, trust, and companionship. Their story was simple, yet powerful. It showed that even in a vast, dangerous galaxy, small acts of kindness could create bonds that lasted forever. The fire crackled, the night was calm, and Jack and Sally sat together, wrapped in the blanket, glowing softly in the warm light. The cold of the station, the fear of the patrol ships, the dangers of the scavengers, all of it felt distant. They had survived, and they had found something far greater than safety, each other. Jack smiled, looking at Sally. "We'll keep surviving. Together! No matter what." She pressed her hand against his arm again, and he felt warmth unlike any he had ever known. Not from a blanket, not from fire, but from trust, care, and connection. It was a warmth that could survive anything. The galaxy outside was vast and full of danger, but for Jack and Sally it no longer felt so lonely. They had each other, and that was enough to face whatever came next. Together, they had discovered the greatest power of all, humanity's warmth, kindness, and the bonds it could create across species, worlds, and time itself. And in that quiet clearing under the stars, Jack realized the truth of it all. One simple choice, giving a blanket, had changed everything. It had saved a life, created a bond, and shown that even in a cold universe, warmth could conquer all. He looked at Sally one last time that night, her eyes reflecting the firelight. He whispered softly, "Thank you for being with me." She pressed her hand lightly against his, a final gesture that needed no words. Together they sat in silence, surrounded by warmth, trust, and hope, ready to face the galaxy side by side.